The Celestial Omnibus. Reading Buzz. The boy who resided at Agathoc's Lodge, 28 Buckingham Park Road, Surbiton, had often been puzzled by the old signpost. Firstly, it pointed up a blank alley, and secondly, it had painted on it in faded characters the words, "To Heaven." His father, though very kind, always laughed at him whenever he or any other child asked a question or spoke. But Mr. Bonds was serious as well as kind. He had a beautiful house and lent books and presided over the literary society. Yet even Mr. Bonds could only say that the signpost was a joke, and when they had gone, he did not at once return to the house. He slipped across the road towards the signpost and began to run up the blank alley. The boy soon came to a standstill and glanced idly at a piece of paper which was pasted on the wall. Rather an odd piece of paper, and he read it. This is what he read.
Owing to lack of patronage, the company is regretfully compelled to suspend the hourly service
and to retain only the sunrise and sunset omnibuses, which will run as usual. It is to be hoped that the public will patronize an arrangement which is intended for their convenience. As an extra inducement, the company will, for the first time, now issue return tickets, available one day only, which may be obtained of the driver. Passengers are again reminded that no tickets are issued at the other end, and that no complaints in this connection will receive consideration from the company.
Neither will the company be responsible for any negligence
or stupidity on the part of passengers, nor for hailstorms, lightning, loss of tickets, nor for any act of God.
Now he had never seen this notice before, nor could he imagine where the omnibus went to. The whole thing, the boy reflected, was run on hopelessly unbusinesslike lines. And the boy went to bed feeling faint and sore, and thankful for only one thing, that he had not said a word about the omnibus. He struck a match, and its light fell not only on his watch, but also on his calendar, so that he knew it to be half an hour to sunrise. It was pitch dark, for the fog had come down, and all Surbiton was wrapped in its embraces. Yet he sprang out and dressed himself, for he was determined to settle once for all which was real. Not only was it horribly dark, but he now realized that it was an impossible terminus for an omnibus. It was a hoax. There he remembered that his watch was fast. The sun would not rise for 2 minutes. Give the bus every chance, he thought, and returned into the alley. But the omnibus was there. It had 2 horses, whose sides were still smoking from their journey, and its 2 great lamps shone through the fog against the alley's walls. The driver was huddled up in a cape. He faced the blank wall.
Please.
His voice quavered.
About when do you start?
He tried to sound nonchalant.
At sunrise.
How far do you go?
The whole way.
And can I have a return ticket which will bring me all the way back?
You can.
Do you know, I half think I'll come.
The driver made no answer, but he unhitched the brake, and scarcely had the boy jumped in before the omnibus was off. How? Did it turn? There was no room. Did it go forward? There was a blank wall, yet it was moving at a stately pace through the fog, and the omnibus, though well built, was cold and somewhat musty. He drew his coat round him, and in so doing chanced to feel his pocket. It was empty. He had forgotten his purse.
Stop!
He shouted.
Stop!
And then, being of a polite disposition, he glanced up at the painted notice board so that he might call the driver by name.
Mr. Brown, stop!
Mr. Brown opened a little window and looked in at the boy.
Mr. Brown, I've left my purse behind. I've not got a penny. I can't pay for the ticket. Will you take my watch, please?
Tickets on this line,
said the driver.
whether single or return, can be purchased by coinage from no terrene mint.
So saying, he handed in the necessary ticket.
It is good of you about the ticket. But if you go on at this rate, however, does your bus pay?
It does not pay. It was not intended to pay.
The driver invited the boy to come up and sit beside him on the box, and together they journeyed on through the fog, which was now changing from yellow to white. After a pause, he told the boy a very little, about the journey's end.
Thunder, by Jove,
Said the boy. He thought of his father and mother. The horses of the omnibus stopped just as a ball of fire burst up and exploded with a ringing noise that was deafening but clear, like the noise of a blacksmith's forge. All the cloud was shattered. The noise had died into the faintest murmur, beneath which another murmur grew, spreading steadily, in a curve that widened. And in widening curves, a rainbow was spreading from the horses' feet into the dissolving mists.
but how beautiful! What colors! Where will it stop? It is more like the rainbows you can tread on, more like dreams.
In the morning sunshine, a precipice shone forth beyond the gulf. The horses moved. They set their feet upon the rainbow,
Look also below.
whispered the driver. The boy looked below, past the flames of the rainbow. He saw 3 maidens rise to the surface of the pool, singing, and playing with something that glistened like a ring.
You, down in the water.
He called. They answered.
You up on the bridge.
There was a burst of music.
You up on the bridge. Good luck to you. Truth in the depth, truth on the height.
The boy was in disgrace. He sat locked up in the nursery, learning poetry for a punishment. His father had said,
My boy, I can pardon anything but untruthfulness. There is no omnibus, no driver, no bridge, no mountain. You are a truant, a liar.
His mother called through the door.
Dear, you ought to come down and to bring your poetry with you.
He came down and found Mr. Bonds,
Here is the great traveller.
said his father grimly.
Here is the young gentleman who drives in an omnibus over rainbows, while young ladies sing to him. After all,
Said Mr. Bonds, smiling.
there is something a little like it in Wagner.
The boy began.
Standing aloof in giant ignorance, of thee I dream, and of the Cyclades as one who sits ashore and longs perchance to visit.
Said the boy and burst into tears.
Come, come. Why do you cry?
It is so, sir. All these things are true.
Stuff and nonsense, my young friend. Tomorrow evening at sunset, we will go up this alley opposite and hunt for your omnibus.
Said Mr. Bonds.
Joy, joy! I told them. You would believe me.
And on the morrow evening, the boy was ready, bubbling with excitement. Naturally enough, for the sun was setting, they ran straight against the omnibus.
Good heavens!
Exclaimed Mr. Bonds.
Good gracious heavens!
The boy jumped in. Mr. Bonds sprang in too. A blast of wind immediately slammed the omnibus door.
Good gracious heavens! We're moving! Hooray!
Said the boy. Mr. Bonds became flustered. He had not intended to be kidnapped. The omnibus was quite dark, and they were moving rapidly.
A strange, a memorable adventure.
He said, surveying the interior of the omnibus. The boy called to the driver for 2 return tickets. They were handed in without a word. Mr. Bonds sighed heavily.
And I beg you not to disgrace me when we arrive. No gossiping, no running. Keep close to my side and never speak to these immortals unless they speak to you. Yes, and give me the return tickets. You will be losing them.
The boy surrendered the tickets but felt a little sore. After all, he had found a way to this place.
But how is there to be a rainbow?
Cried the boy.
You distract me.
Snapped Mr. Bonds.
I wish to meditate on beauty.
The lad bit his lip. He made 100 good resolutions. He would not laugh, or run, or sing, or do any of the vulgar things that must have disgusted his new friends last time, for the omnibus had reached the summit of a moonlit hill. He exclaimed,
The mountain! Listen to the new tune in the water! Look at the campfires in the ravines!
And Mr. Bonds, after a hasty glance, retorted,
Water? Campfires? Ridiculous rubbish. Hold your tongue. There is nothing at all.
Yet, under the boy's eyes, a rainbow formed, compounded not of sunlight and storm, but of moonlight and the spray of the river. The three horses put their feet upon it. Mr. Bond said that nothing was there.
Does the bridge make you dizzy?
The boy asked.
Dizzy?
Gasped Mr. Bonds.
I want to go back. Tell the driver.
But the driver shook his head.
We are nearly there,
Said the boy. Mr. Bonds moaned. They moved over the lunar rainbow, which ever and ever broke away behind their wheels.
I'm coming!
The boy shouted, again forgetting the 100 resolutions.
The boy is returning.
Cried a voice to other voices, who repeated,
The boy is returning.
I am bringing Mr. Bonds with me.
Silence.
I should have said Mr. Bonds is bringing me with him.
Profound silence.
I want to go back.
Said Mr. Bonds.
I see no one. I see nothing. I want to go back.
Then he cried to the driver,
Save me. Let me stop in your chariot. Take me back to my world.
The driver replied,
I am the means and not the end. I am the food and not the life. Stand by yourself as that boy has stood. I cannot save you, for poetry is a spirit, and that they would worship, it must worship in spirit and in truth.
Mr. Bonds crawled out of the beautiful omnibus. With a shriek, he fell against the hard, moonlit rock.
From the Kingston Gazette, Surbiton Times, 3928. The body of Mr. Septimus Bonds has been found in a shockingly mutilated condition in the vicinity of the Bermondsey Gas Works. The deceased's pockets contained a couple of omnibus tickets. The unfortunate gentleman had apparently been hurled from a considerable height. Adapted